Welcome to the Glencoe Public Library's program Sharing Stories. We've got a fun, collaborative, and very Glencoe evening ahead of us. We'll begin with Steve Pfeiffer, who is co-editor of the newly published Volume 2 of Storied Stuff, Show and Tell for Grownups. Steve will describe the Storied Stuff project that forms the basis of the series. He'll then introduce the 9 people, as you can see, who will read their short Storied Stuff essays and show you the keepsakes that inspired them. If you're interested in purchasing a copy of Sharing Stories or Storied Stuff, you can do so after the program ends, and all proceeds benefit the library. A few words about Steve Pfeiffer. He's a New York Times best-selling author who has written over 20 nonfiction books on everything from baseball to social justice, his own memoir, and collaborations with civil rights icon C.T. Vivian and former Secretary of State James Baker. Originally a Glencoe resident, he now lives in Evanston with his wife Sharon, who is co-editor of Storied Stuff. Steve and the other readers will be happy to answer your questions after the presentation. If everyone could be sure to turn off their cell phones, that would be very helpful. Thank you. Thanks so much for initiating this event, Steve, and I will let you take the reins from here.
You guys hear me? I want to be Sharon short. She's an award-winning novelist of the 8 book series of Janewell Mysteries, and award-winning writer of short stories and other stuff. And very importantly, everything, including inspiring. We're really excited to be here, not because I go back 60 years, almost 70 years to with the library here, but because so many of the people up here who are contributors to Storied Stuff 2 are also Central School graduates, and the vast majority of us are from the same class, 1964. There are a few winners, but we're still letting me up here. Storied Stuff 2 has over 100 stories by contributors who aren't in Storied Stuff Volume 1. And in addition to the folks up here who are contributors to the book, there are several people in the audience who are also contributors. So Sharon's going to tell you a little about our origin story, which most of you have probably heard, but for those of you who haven't, she'll share that, and then we'll get to the readings and stuff.
Our origin story. During COVID, you might remember that a lot of us didn't go anywhere. We stayed inside. And we were lucky enough to have some very good friends with whom we Zoomed weekly. And I think a lot of people did that. Little cocktail parties over Zoom or whatever. And one night after we got off, Steve, or I guess it was just before we got off, Steve said, "Why doesn't next week everybody bring in an object, look around your house?" Because all we were doing was pretty much looking around our houses. So look around the house and see if there's an object that has stayed with you, that you have carried from place to place, that you have treasured. And then bring it next week when we all meet on Zoom and tell us the story of that object. And because we thought, you know what, we had done enough hand wringing, we've done enough, like, when is this going to end? What's going to happen? So the next week, our dear friends, brought objects and told their stories. And Steve, who had known most of these people for most of his life, heard stories that he had never heard before. And we realized that a lot of us have those kinds of stories. We have those pieces in our home that tell something about us, that are important to us. And we could just, maybe we could open this up as a website, and we would do a Storied Stuff project, and it would be Storied Stuff, Show and Tell for Grownups. And I agreed that we should do this for 1 year. Now it's been 5 years, And and this is our second volume of stories. And we have how many?
Over 100 in each one.
Oh, over 100 in each one, but we've had 200 contributors.
Over 250.
Over 250 contributors, so it's quite on. And, you know, it's very meaningful to people when they write their stories, I think. So we hope, after you've heard our wonderful readers up here tonight, that you might go home if you haven't already. I know some of you in the audience have read these pieces, but we hope you'll go home and look around your house. And even though you don't have to stay there forever, you could look around and find an object maybe that has stayed there forever and send it in to us. Website is storied-stuff.com. And you can go on the site, and it's very easy to submit a piece. So that's our, is that enough? Oh, yes, we publish 2 new stories every Wednesday. So, but they're all on the website. They all exist in perpetuity on the website. So you can go and spend days and days reading them all.
What's like?
Oh, the length, we started at 250 words. We expanded it to about 500 words. And when I write them, though, I get to write them as long as I want. So don't count the words. But yeah, we try to stay under 5 words. Okay.
So we'll get started. Our first reader is a graduate of Central School, class of 64, Rob Weinstein, and he lives in Glenview, so he's really migrated. He describes himself as a part-time actor, part-time Home Depot associate, full-time father and grandfather. We've seen him perform at the Oil Van Theater, which is this really cute theater in a storefront in Glenview. And if you haven't ever gone there, I really suggest you look into it. And I think when you hear Rob read his story tonight, you'll maybe understand how he got into that business. So Rob, you want to come up?
My name's Rob. I'm an alcoholic, and I am. So anyway, for as far back as I can remember, in my mind, that's the age of 7. My parents would once a month take my brother and me to our grandparents for dinner. There, we would meet up with our aunt, uncle, and 2 cousins. I was a snooper and loved going through my grandparents' stuff. It was then I discovered the scrapbook, and I'll show you the scrapbook. So this is the scrapbook, since we're supposed to bring all these along. Okay. A book loaded with photos of my grandmother from her prior life. And it was then that I discovered that my grandmother had been a true star of stage, or as it was known in the early 20th century, vaudeville. Who was this woman that I only knew as my grandmother? And who were all these other people? And wow, did I find out. That scrapbook and I became quite attached. I came to learn that my grandmother, or as she was known, Hattie Darling, had an act with her 2 brothers. She sang, danced, and played the violin, while her older brother, Herman Timberg, wrote the material and was a comic. Her younger brother, Sammy Timberg, wrote music and later went on to write music for Popeye, Betty Boop, and Little Lulu cartoons for Fleischer Studios. My grandmother toured with the likes of the top performers of the day, Georgie Jessel and Sophie Tucker, and I have those pictures. So here's Georgie Jessel with from his day there, with signed, and here's Sophie Tucker. Not such a great condition, but there she is. For those of you who may or may not remember Sophie Tucker, and was courted by Benny Leonard, the then world lightweight boxing champion, and I also have his picture here. There he is, right there, Benny Leonard, also autographed to my grandmother. What captured me the most, however, was her relationship to Groucho, Chico, Harpo, and Zeppo, aka the Marx Brothers, or as I preferred to call them, my teachers. And there's that picture as well, signed by Groucho, to Hattie with love from Groucho. You see, not only was I more than a bit of a class clown, but I also had been bitten by the acting bug. I ate these guys up, and it turned out that not only did my grandmother tour with them, but she also managed their act for a short period of time. This scrapbook was a door into a world that brought life to an era that was the beginning of Broadway and so much more. The photos, autographs, news clippings, and reviews are a window into a world that to this day fascinates me beyond words. When I was in high school, my grandmother would take me to New York, and her surviving family would gather for a night of laughing and singing. It was also my grandmother who taught me the theater etiquette. Number one rule, always arrive at least 30 minutes before curtain. Hattie Darling was a fountain of theater information, which I relish to this day. My fascination with the theater and having delved into acting has real roots that I'm able to use. P.S. When Hattie passed, my uncle wanted her scrapbook and wanted to give me only a photocopy. Hattie's last gift to me was to will it to me. Thank you, Grandma Hattie, and this is it, and it's filled with lots of memorabilia. So thank you all. Appreciate it.
Lisa Miller-Slasky, a dear friend, also a member of the last 64, wrote the piece she's going to read with another classmate, Hillary Pinky Rose, who is a stylist who's out of town and can't be here. Lisa is a retired educator, and she was head of Teach for America in Indianapolis before she and her husband, Larry, moved, thank goodness, back to the Chicago area. We're all able to spend a lot of time together. So, Lisa, you want to come up and read your piece?
I think I was under the limited word restrictions for my short one. So this is not the piece that's in the book. It's a different one. If New Trier East High School offered transportation via a yellow school bus in 1966, our group of girlfriends had no interest in signing up. Armed with our newly acquired driver's licenses from the state of Illinois, we tried to convince our mothers that they could do without their cars just one day each week, so we could create a carpool. 5 girls, 1 for each school day's round-trip drive to New Trier. And miraculously, they agreed. And so the group, much later to be known as the Carpoolers, was born and carried us through to graduation in June of 1968, and then some. And those rides to and from school were memorable. We were always busy chatting about homework and boys and college and our parents, who were often juicy topics for conversation. We often ran out of our homes and jumped in the car eating some version of breakfast, our outfits not yet fully intact or with jumbo curlers still in our hair. We were yanking down our too short skirts and yanking up our panty girdles and hose. Pantyhose were still not a common wardrobe accessory. One girl was always late and her mother's car unreliable. One was always early and ready to zoom home right after school, and one had to cram in a younger sister on her assigned day. But we managed to get there every day, leaving our car in the elder lane lot and trudging the few short blocks in all kinds of weather, ready for our school day. And we bonded, we commiserated, we laughed and cried, and we stayed friends for many, many years. 2010 was the year of our 60th birthdays. We gathered and laughed and cried and shared. One of the members of the group had Carpoolers bracelets made for everyone, and we wore them as a sign of camaraderie and for good karma. Sadly, one of our original group is no longer with us, but we all remember those days fondly and feel enriched by the friendships that began at age 16 and continue today. So here is the bracelet. I don't know, some of you may remember that on our birthdays, on our sweet 16s, we had these charm bracelets with these little bits. So this says Carpoolers 2010 with the 5 names on the.
Next speaker, Joyce Newcomb, uh, is a member of the writing workshop that Sharon and I taught for many years. And when we first met and started talking, it turned out that she had grown up kitty corner from us in Drexel in Glencoe, although she had moved a couple of years. We moved in 55 and Joyce moved out to Skokie Ridge in 53. But in a small world, she's a Central School. I have no idea what year she graduated. What year? Oh. She's a great writer, and not too long ago she published a novel of historical fiction set in 1812, and for middle schoolers and maybe young adults too, called Sophia's Journey. It's really great, and I recommend it if you've got grandkids or whomever who are looking for a good read. Want to function?
Sit like this. I'm not serving tea. When I was a child, the sky blue teapot sat on the counter beside the stove until called into service at dinner. My mother brewed tea in it by pouring boiling hot water over 2 tea bags of Lipton tea, orange pekoe. After our meal, my parents would linger over their tea, discussing the day's events, while my 2 sisters and I wanted to be excused, waited to be excused from the table. As the 3 of us grew older, we joined the conversations relating not only our triumphs and our blunders, but offering our opinions on more wide-ranging topics: philosophy, religion, politics. Nothing was taboo. Every opinion considered with respect. If the teapot ran dry, Mother would brew more tea. Suddenly, dinners served on home china in the dining, Sunday dinners served on bone china in the dining room after church were the best. We would sit around the table talking for hours. The teapot was as much a part of dinner as the conversation. Mother had acquired it during the Great Depression. Buy a pound of Lipton tea and receive a blue ceramic teapot with the company name molded on the bottom. Wherever my parents set up housekeeping for 57 years, that pot was always on the table. When the time came after my parents had died, first one and then 5 years later the other, I brought the blue teapot home with me. It sits on my desk. The spout is chipped, the lid is missing, a treasure still. The teapot now holds only memories.
I think what our next reader, Joanna lacks in Central School credentials, he makes up in being one of the most prolific contributors to Storied stuff. And you can read a lot of the pieces, all the pieces he's written on the Storied stuff. Joe's an architect and writer and done a lot of presentations here at the library, from what I understand. Design, history, and culture. So I think you can find those on YouTube. And he's going to read these now from Storied Stuff.
Thank you, Steve, and thanks for this opportunity. Well, I will start with an apology. Originally, I thought I would have the thing to bring tonight to illustrate my talk, which is a photograph from the 1950s, but it's lost in my house. I can't find it. It was a few months ago that I did this little tale, and I can't find it, but fortunately, I found a not very good photograph of a photograph, which I will just show you very quickly. Sorry, it's not, the original photograph is in much better detail. All right. In the 1950s, Little American boys wanted to be cowboys, and I was one of them. Like TV's Marshall Matt Dillon in Gunsmoke, from 1955 to 1975, a total of 635 episodes, or at the movies like John Wayne's character in The Searchers or Gary Cooper in High Noon, I was ready to ride the range, nab the cattle rustlers, I love this alliteration, save dance hall damsels in distress, and all the while ensure the western march of U.S. manifest destiny, no matter how politically incorrect that may be today. But to be an honest to God, rootin' tootin' cowboy, you needed the right outfit. I mean, I may not have had my own horse, no thanks to you, Dad. But as the old photo attests, I most certainly did have the look down pat. Thanks, Mom. Let's start with my feet, firmly on the desert dirt in high-top, chunky-heeled, pointy-toed, genuine leather cowboy boots, black with contrasting decorative white leather inlays. In those babies, you could guide old paint faithfully on the trail, or with equal aplomb, quickly crush that sneaky rattler over there by the three-armed cactus. Next, sprouting from my footwear, the Western trousers, stylish yet comfortable. Black with white side leg and trouser top striping. If you look closer, there's a Western scene on the front of each pant leg. It's a horse and rider, undoubtedly imagined amigos of mine riding amidst the purple sage. Then the black Western shirt with wide, round, floppy collar, again with contrasting white edging, a loosely tied white necktie with ornamental silver holder pulling it all together. Now, it's important here to state for the record, I was not playing an all-black clad villain. Hence the white necktie, indicating I was on the right side of the law and frontier society. That hat, oh, that Western hat, big and beautiful, black with interlaced white ribboning for an elegant frame to my confident visage. Instant shade anywhere, but still admired by the ladies. Undoubtedly, I used the drawstring as needed. Evidently, in the picture, it was a bit windy that day. Now, for the controversial part of my ensemble, my weaponry. Yes, a cowboy needed a gun, and of course, in those days, open carry, of course. The white leather holster with silver rivets and matching belt are elegant. Like most buckaroos, I wore it low on my right, even though I was born left-handed. The handgun itself that I am casually cradling is a little hard to identify. I suspect it is the usual reliable toy. 6-gun revolver with faux pearl plastic handle. Maybe like a Colt 1851 Navy revolver, very common in the late 19th century frontier. Anyway, I was proclaiming my Second Amendment rights, I suppose. Today, I'm not so proud of that part of my gear, but you know, times were different back then. There were dangers lurking at every turn, at least in my visions of desolate wastelands. So I'm sure you will understand I had to be prepared. At any rate, all things considered, as a 7-year-old cowpoke, I look damn good. Thank you.
Next reader is a dear friend, Howard Rossman. Another class of 64. Howard trained as a counseling psychologist, but then ended up going into investment management. But really, I think his whole life has been defined by being involved in the community, and most recently, over the last 20 years or so, he founded and still is the force behind Civic Leadership Foundation, which is an organization that helps young people, mostly middle schoolers, and high schoolers in the Chicago area and elsewhere across the country. So really terrific organization. Howard has other interests related to what he's going to be reading about tonight. Those are musical, and besides playing the guitar, I learned that Storied Stuff 1 in July, he and Mickey, who's up here as well, started talking about voice lessons. And once he heard about Mickey taking voice lessons, Howard decided to do that as well. And I understand they had the first recital yesterday. So, anyway, yeah, I think you'll see kind of a relationship to music or the way it unfolds in his lovely writing. So, come on up, Howard.
Thanks. All right, this is because it's the class of 64, I would need my glasses. So that's the piece. The story, as I recall it, is that my father proposed to my mother only after he saw that she could dance. And dance she could. It wasn't a long courtship. In fact, it was only a matter of weeks between their first blind date, that first dance, and the wedding. They hardly knew each other, and I'm certain that the smoothness of their feet belied the friction of their early marriage. Yet as a child, I remember music often played in our living room, and we would watch our parents dance, joyfully, playfully, lovingly. And they taught us, kids, how to dance too. Certainly not the dances of our youth, but the jitterbug, the cha-cha, dances of their youth, dances of their courtship, dances where two became one. Somewhere along the way, this piece appeared, found its way into our parents' living room. I have no idea where it came from, and unfortunately, no one to ask when it arrived. But from one perspective, it's simply a tchotchke, which, for those of you who don't know, is a Yiddish term usually loosely translated as something no one thought they wanted and no one can ever get rid of. But when it came time to sell the home and distribute the stuff of a lifetime, I knew I wanted that. It now sits in the corner of my desk, not a thing of my youth, not itself a cherished object, simply two figures, inextricably entwined, moving together in a silent song, reminding me of the way my parents will always dance in my heart.
Another classmate, Peggy Wolf, who is an award-winning journalist with food as the main subject about which she writes, contributed a piece, and it's interesting to see that the object she wrote about from her childhood influences the career she ended up with. And Peggy is the editor of a terrific anthology. She has even a more terrific name, Fried Walleye and Cherry Pie, Midwestern Writers on Food. But it's really a terrific book because she assembled this great cast of writers from the Midwest write on any number of foods and other objects related to food in the Midwest. Thank you.
Thank you for that intro. Oh, hey, thank you. Queens, New York. As the summer of 1965 was coming to a close, my family took a driving trip to Flushing Meadows, New York, the site of the New York World's Fair. The fair, which stretched over 2 years, was described as a showcase of mid-20th century American culture. And it certainly held to that high standard, especially when you got up close to U.S. Steel's contribution, the 12-story high Unisphere, a stainless steel model of the Earth. Actually, the man I would marry, okay, back there, was at the World's Fair the year before, right? Over that 2-year stretch. Okay, anyway, we missed. Amongst the unmatched legacy of tourist junk, it's not tchotchkes, it's junk. World fairs are supposed to offer glimpses into man's achievements and the technology of the future. A grand consumer show, and in that 1965 fair, bright and cheery visions of American companies dominated, like the brand new Ford Mustang, we would get a red one, space rockets and supersonic jets. We would not get those. I think boys who become men are born with transportation genes. So my dad and little brother hovered over those exhibits. I don't remember where my sister went, but I headed over to the food pavilion, passing up the sandwich cafe where, for $1.55, you could have all the 7-Up you could drink, and stopped in at a flamboyantly competitive exhibit with its larger-than-life bottle of soda pop, Canada Dry ginger ale. But they were introducing a new grapefruity soft drink called Wink. Samples were offered, which I gladly took. It had a sort of breakout taste, standout fruity-ish, yet I had no influencers to tag. I then filled out a small paper with my name and address with hundreds of thousands of other fairgoers. I entered their drawing for an entire case of the new soda Wink. What made Canada Dry's exhibit my best fair memory didn't occur that day. No, it must have been a week after we got home when our doorbell rang. A case of Wink had been delivered with my name on it. An entire case, mine. Looking back on my luck, I really don't win things, do you? Maybe it helped mobilize me for my next phase. I now see it as one big win with its vista of promise of a lot more food and drink in my life.
And actually, Fred Mackman is an interloper. He was class of 63 and grew up around the corner from us. He's retired communications consultant, and I've been impressed most with him over the last several years from the amazing photographs he posts on a regular basis on Facebook, many of which show old buildings that are being torn down, and they're really just wooden structures, and they're now selling for huge amounts of money. Also, he regularly posts White Sox games. Did you go to this year?
Only about 15. I've gone to as many as 30 a year. It's been a challenge, but when your family's gone to their first Sox game in 1921, that's what the definition of fan is, fanatic.
Yeah, his your uncle.
Uncle, yes.
He was a pediatrician who lived in South Shore, and he's the one who got the tickets originally, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, amazing. Anyway, want to read your piece?
Yes, thank you. And looking at the list, I saw that I was being relegated to number 7 by Steve, but then I realized what an honor it was. Number 7, Mickey Mantle. I was going to wear my 1951 Mitchell & Ness replica jersey tonight, but I'm actually going to talk about a much more serious issue. November 8, 2024 marks a very significant day in our family's history. On March 29, 1973, my father suffered a massive heart attack in his office, passing away at age 55. As the only family member who could be reached, I drove 45 minutes in freezing rain, not knowing his fate. The plant manager didn't want to inform me over the phone. To a hospital on the west side, St. Anne's, for which I'd never even known existed. Upon entering the emergency room, I was ushered into a windowless office and was told by the late John Weil, another great one who left us way too soon, that my father had died. He handed me a large manila envelope containing my father's personal possessions. Without thinking, I emptied them onto the table. The look on John's face told me I should have waited. Various familiar objects cascaded out: glasses, wallet, keys, change, and then the ring. Dad did not wear a wedding ring, only an initial ring with a small diamond from a stick pin his father had been awarded as an officer of South Shore Temple that Dad had received from his religious school confirmation in 1932. Rolled across the table until I literally slapped down on the table to stop it from rolling. Because he wore it continuously, this was my sudden realization that he was gone. Like my father, I didn't wear a wedding ring, having been married a little more than 2 months before. And I'm going to digress. Will you stand up, please? That's how I can it. We're going on 53 years, a sad event 53 years, a happy event 53 years ago. I had it sized, and for better and for worse, I've worn it longer than he has. It's obviously the most valuable thing I own. Last November, my twin brother Frank became the first-time grandfather of Charlie, a 9-pound, 15-ounce boy. Our family tree will grow, and that name will be preserved for another generation. It was not named for my father. Our daughter Marissa took that honor in 1978. But I've assured Frank and my nephew Grant that the ring will be theirs, fitting symbol of our family's continuity. Thank you.
As I'm looking at our next reader, Mickey Pierce Silverstein, I guess I could have put Mickey number 7, and you and Yogi Bear number 8. Anyway, Mickey's another member of class 64. She's retired. She was an elementary school reading specialist for something over 40 years, and now she says she's doing a lot less rushing around and more singing. And I think her piece brings home the importance of relationships that we developed over these many, many years.
Hi, everybody. Oh, hi, Sandy. This is my piece. It's given to me when I was 9 by a very old friend of mine who's sitting right here. It's a birthday card. It's hard for me. We hadn't met yet, but she was on our swing set outside of the back door of my house. I went outside. She was 3. I was still 2. I didn't wonder what she was doing there, but I found out she lived in the house next door. When it was time for her to go home, she said her name was Sandy and asked if I wanted to be her best friend. I said yes. Sometimes, even when young, one makes really good decisions. This was one of those times. 7 years later, she gave me this homemade birthday card. We were old friends by then. If you look closely at the note, she described me as her best friend, a nice, sweet girl. She signed her name, then erased it and added the caveat that sometimes she didn't think I was such a true friend, then re-signed, Love, Sandy. It's true. At the time I recalled, we recently had a minor to-do in her room. I knew then, as now, that her love was unconditional and our friendship authentic. It still is. It always will be. We talk now as adults, but often something gets triggered and we are 12 years old again, or in one of our many pretend worlds, seamlessly moving through, this says 6 decades, but now it's 7. One of my very best decisions was made that day.
This next piece Sharon's going to read. Sadly, our classmate Jim Topper passed away earlier this year. Amazing guy. Film exec, therapist, lawyer. His wife Laura had an orchard and winery in California, and they opened up a coffee house prior to their community together. It's also, the last several years, in our writing workshop, we were just beginning to blossom as a writer. So Sharon's going to read this piece.
It's an honor to read Jim's piece. June 1969, Glencoe, a reserve suburb of Chicago, stirred with a different kind of energy that summer. Vietnam, protesters, summer of love. There, I bumped into John Goldman, an old friend from middle school, his eyes sparkling with a conspiratorial gleam. He declared he was leaving on a wild escapade, a psychedelic road trip fueled by a decommissioned school bus and a yearning for something more. And he invited me. John had assembled a motley crew. Bob Myers, our high school's golden boy athlete, and Jeff Harris, another football star on his way to West Point, joined the fray. The three of us, fueled by mescaline's kaleidoscopic visions, boarded the plane on a Monday to meet John out east, our hearts brimming with rebellion and adventure. We painted houses for the summer in a constant waft of weed. The yellow school bus was transformed by Bob's artistry, its backside painted with a huge depiction of the Zigzag Man. Its utilitarian interior morphed into a haven of mismatched mattresses. We were nomads, painting our way across New England, each stroke a rebellion against the monotony of the college. Bleecker Bob's record store in Greenwich Village became a pilgrimage site. We left, clutching our tickets to Woodstock, passports to a promised land of music and togetherness. The festival itself was a sensory overload, a swirling vortex of mud, music, and a haze of psychedelics. We shared joints with the Grateful Dead, their music a soundtrack to a summer of love and liberation. Every stranger a friend. But as with all summers, ours reached its inevitable end. The Monday after the festival, a melancholic gray settled. I said goodbye to my comrades as, ironically, I headed to basic training in Tacoma, the shared adventures of forever memory. I hitched a ride on a flatbed truck hauling scaffolding, the irony not lost on me, a temporary stage dismantled as I embarked on my own solo journey. In the solitude of the ride, the magic truly unfolded. Nickel-plated guitar strings electrified the air, evocative and iconic. It was Jimi Hendrix, his Fender Stratocaster singing a spellbinding anthem of the times. He was playing a medley, and to my hazy brain, interwoven with the familiar strings, was none other than the Star-Spangled Banner. Here I was, alone on a truck bed, leaving behind a generation-defining event on a gray Monday dripping with rain. Hendrix, in his only documented morning performance, was serenading me, a lone hitchhiker with a reimagined national anthem. What a juxtaposition. Rebellion wrapped in patriotism, a challenge to the status quo. Words failed to capture the shiver of surprise and delight that ran down my spine then, a feeling that resonates today. It was a perfect moment, a solitary communion with music and history, a validation of the transformative power of art. Hendrix, in his irreverent and emotional playing, echoed the spirit of Woodstock, a spirit that, like that psychedelic summer, forever altered the landscape of my life. And here are his tickets.